Does the moral argument make any sense? Not remotely, as we've shown many times before, but the religious keep using it because internally they just really like the sound of it. That doesn't make it true or anything, and especially when they don't think anybody is watching, it tends to work on the already indoctrinated. It's still dumb though, so here we go again. We're going to be looking at a video from a channel called Freethinking Ministries. It's a discussion between Dr. David Baggett and Tim Stratton, we all know him, over the moral argument and Calvinism. It's another one of those internal dialogues that show just what they're thinking and why. But to anyone on the outside, we know they're not really thinking at all. They're just feeling, which isn't exactly a surprise. So let's get into it and show why all of this is just silly, not that these people really give a damn.
What do you think, Dave? With objective moral values and duties in mind, does it even make sense to offer the moral argument if one believes that God causally determines all thoughts, all beliefs, all actions, all behaviors all the time, and thus no human ever possesses an opportunity to think or act otherwise? Does that make sense?
So before I start, they had a little stinger at the beginning, which I assume is just going to show up later, so I just skipped over it, just to get to the meat of the video. But just in case anybody complains that I didn't cover the whole thing, that's why. Anyhow, Tim is just an idiot, which I think we all knew going in. The only use for the moral argument, the only legitimate use, is to convince people who don't already believe all that stuff that a God has to exist. Instead, they're just using it as a means of comforting those who already believe, to convince them that they have good reasons to return to the pews and pay people like Tim more money, because in reality, that's all he's after. This is just confirmation bias. This is going to be another one of those videos where we've got two theists just letting their guard down because they figure that nobody else is going to be looking in. Those are getting to be some of my favorite videos to look at, if any of these actually qualify as favorites, because it just shows how ludicrous their thinking actually is. It is, as I said, just confirmation bias. They just really want to believe it.
Well, I think it does. I've been trying really hard for years not to pick fights with my Calvinist friends, because I used to do that all the time. It made me very unpopular.
So, you're a dick. Who could have guessed? Because here's the thing. I don't go out there and pick fights. Never have, never will. I don't come to your door and knock on it. I wait till you come to mine. I know I've told this story before, but I think it fits, so here it is again. A really, really, really long time ago, I mean close to 30 years ago now, I was one of the early moderators over on the Downnet IRC channel, Atheism. It was, at the time, the biggest channel on the network. It could have been the biggest channel in the world. I don't remember anymore, but it was huge. This was probably in the mid to late 90s, so the online world wasn't all that big yet, but, There were then, as there are today, people who went and trolled the religious. People who purposely went to Christian channels specifically to piss them off so that they could get banned and come back and brag. Now, I thought that those people were assholes then, just as I do today. Don't be a dick. It's one thing to go and have a serious discussion and get banned because they're afraid of what you have to say. It's another entirely to purposely try to make a pest of yourself until they get tired of you and try to get rid of you. Fast forward to today, and I still don't do that. I hang out, say, in Reddit's Debate and Atheist subreddit, and I wait for the religious to come and engage with us. And I still don't engage with the trolls. But if people want to have a serious conversation, then I am more than happy to oblige. It just never goes well for the religious, but that's not because I'm not trying. It's because they have no rational or evidential argument to bring to the table. The failure is all theirs, not mine. Now, I'm sure they think the same thing about me, but the reality, it is what it actually is, no matter what your faith makes you think. So don't be an asshole and go out and try to upset the religious just for the sake of upsetting the religious, because that never gets you anywhere worthwhile, and nobody thinks you're clever. So just don't do it.
And I appreciate your forcing my hand to talk about this. Oh man, yeah. Well, I know our Calvinist friends disagree with us and all.
But honestly, given the stories in your big book of multiple choice, they have to be right on at least some things, don't they? Because if God has all of those pesky omni properties that just seem to like, then free will is utterly impossible. God, before he did anything, must have known how everything would turn out with perfect precision. Because that's what omniscience means, perfect knowledge. Of course, that also means that God can't have free will because of God's perfect knowledge, which means that his actions must be fixed. So, if he knows the future with perfect clarity and he can't be wrong, which is what a lot of religious people say, then he doesn't actually have a choice either, does he? Of course, the religious run around with the goalposts on this, like they do with most things, and try to redefine their terms so that the image of God that they have in their heads, it at least sounds a little more plausible, at least to them. Of course, if you really start to look at these characteristics, it becomes painfully obvious that they really don't work together. That's why the problem of evil is such a problem. You can't get there from the characteristics that the religious have arbitrarily assigned. So the Calvinists, if omniscience is actually a thing, they're right. God knows every action that you will ever take in your life before you are even born, and he knows how things will turn out absolutely. You are damned or you are saved before you are even conceived. God isn't the one making those decisions. He just knows what decisions you will make, and there goes free will right out the window, because free will is the ability to do otherwise. It's the ability to do something that God hasn't foreseen. By definition, free will can't exist if that God is real. Of course, Christians don't like that, so they've been trying to walk back a lot of the omni properties of late. But since it's all just made up to begin with, who cares?
But yeah, if you're just asking for my own opinion, right,
Mhm.
right here and right now, yeah, my view is very similar. That if you're a thoroughgoing Calvinist, and the only freedom that you really believe in is a sort of compatibilist freedom, according to which we do what we want to do or something like that, but you couldn't do otherwise.
Mhm.
And how does that work exactly? Because you can't do what you want to do if what you want to do is something that you can't do because everything is predetermined? I asked the same thing to a lot of anti free will people out there, and it doesn't work out well for them either. First, define what you mean by free will, because they don't actually have a solid definition, or the ones that they offer are just so ludicrous that you pretty much have to throw out everything else in order to get anywhere remotely close. But often it all comes down to, well, it just seems to me, and I'm not at all impressed by your opinions. I want to see your facts, and sadly, a lot of people, they just don't have any. It's why a lot of philosophers go so wrong, because it's all, well, it sounds good to me. I don't care. I do not now, nor will I ever care how things sound to you. I care what you can demonstrate is true in the real world outside of your own head, and that's not even a thing for a lot of armchair philosophers. They just really want it to be true. Now, where have we heard that one before?
Then it seems to me that the gospel is not very good news for the non-elect, because it's not like I mean, my view that they freely reject the gospel. They invariably reject it. They couldn't do otherwise. Now that's based on my analysis of freedom as a libertarian, like you, though.
Mhm.
And of course, they would just say, well, we believe in a different kind of freedom.
which is why what I believe doesn't matter. And this goes for a lot of people, doesn't it? This is why I don't care about what if. I care about what is. Right now, as I'm writing this, one of the recommended videos on screen to the right of this video is Molinism with William Lane Craig. Now, I'm not going to watch it. I'm not going to do it, but it will just be Craig saying, "This is what I believe," or "This is how I read the Bible," without anything of substance whatsoever. This is kind of how religion works, right? And for those who don't know, Molinism is a Catholic thing where God has this kind of middle knowledge where he knows some things about reality, but not everything about reality, because the 16th century Spanish priest Luis de Molina couldn't square actual omniscience with how people actually seem to operate, or I guess more properly, how he wanted to believe that people operated, because all of this comes down to what people want to believe, not truth, not actual demonstrable factual truth. Truth is nowhere in the picture whatsoever. Instead of admitting that under Christianity, free will just doesn't work, he just arbitrarily changed how he saw God because, hell, it's all made up to begin with, right? If God was actually real and had actual characteristics, then you couldn't just change them on a whim. God is what God is. If God was real in the first place, of course. The fact that these people figure, well, I can just change it, shows they don't really take any of it seriously to begin with.
My thinking on that is maybe doing what you want to do is necessary for freedom, but it's not sufficient. Surely it's not sufficient.
I don't even know what he means by that. Either you have the ability to do what you want to do within the bounds of actual reality, because you can't just choose to flap your arms and fly, or you don't. Sufficiency is irrelevant. I mean, as I said, I can't just choose to go outside, flap my arms, and fly around, no matter how much I might really want to do that. That's not one of the choices that are open to me as a physical being. As a physical human, anyway. Birds can do it, but you get what I'm meaning. If that's what these people mean by free will, then that's just stupid. It's an irrational position to hold, and I have seen people who have argued that because you can't fly, you don't actually have free will because there are limits. Yeah, well, welcome to the real fucking world. Let's try to be realistic about this, okay?
Right. And I think there are all sorts of thought examples that illustrate that with perfect clarity. Well, so on my view, we do need God's grace, right?
No, you want that to be true. See, this is why I say that when they don't think that we're watching, they all just let their guard down. They don't have to justify anything to each other because they're all deluded in pretty much the same way. The irrationality gets really, really obvious. It's like if you went to an alien abduction convention, and yes, those do exist. There was a 2023 Pine Bush UFO Speakers Conference in New York, which focused specifically on alien abductions, because this shit is actually out there. But do you think that they're going to get up and try to start justifying any of these crazy beliefs to attendees? Of course not. They don't have to, because everyone there already believes. They don't want skeptics around at their convention any more than Tim and Dave do. That's why I try to do some of these videos from time to time, because that's when they haul out the clown hats and wear them proudly because they think nobody else is paying attention. This is just wall-to-wall confirmation bias. And it's still just dumb.
So we don't have the kind of libertarian freedom that's Pelagian or semi-Pelagian or anything like that.
Right.
We do need God's grace,
Yes.
and that, of course, is a common misunderstanding of this sort of affirmation of libertarian freedom, that it somehow vitiates the need for God's grace, and that's not our position at all.
I don't care what your position is unless you can back it up with evidence. Faith and fifis don't matter. Granted, the second you say that, then there's no reason to talk about religion at all, right? Or most other things that humans do, because much of human activity is absolutely ridiculous and irrational. And that's kind of a problem if you think about it. It's one reason that my tagline is exposing stupidity wherever it hides. Not religious stupidity specifically, but all stupidity. Granted, we've pretty much settled on religion around here because religion is demonstrably harmful. You don't see psychics running for government office on the basis of knowing what's coming up. You don't see alien abduction advocates running because the Greys are going to help sort things out. No, but you do get the religious running because they think God is on their side. If the others were as demonstrably dangerous as the religious are, then sure, we'd spend more time debunking them. At least at this point, we only have one really demonstrably dangerous mess to deal with, not 105. Because I don't think I could really handle doing a whole lot more.
No, we need God's grace. Like we were talking about before, we need God's grace to be forgiven and to be changed and to be transformed and to be perfected. And ultimately, that perfection is going to be the deepest sort of freedom that there is of all, right? Freedom from sin itself.
That's just your claim, though. It means no more than, well, of course our alien overlords are coming to save us. You're just an idiot. You just are. Yet, that's all any of these people have, right? Just claims based on nothing but, it sounds good to me, and we just really want it to be true. But that shouldn't impress anyone. But sadly, a lot of people are impressed, because a lot of people are really stupid. And that's why the world is the way that it is. Very few people care about the actual demonstrable truth. And I find that tremendously sad. How about you?
So, on my view, yeah, there is a close connection between meaningful libertarian free will and a workable moral argument. If I were giving the moral argument as a Calvinist to myself, I would be all conflicted. But in response to myself, I would say, so can you explain again, your view on God's grace and why exactly the gospel is good news here? Because if someone is outside of that group that's going to be conferred God's effectual grace, there is no way that they can accept the offer of salvation, right?
Now, this is where we're going to have some problems just inherently, because everything that they're saying is just a load of mumbo jumbo. I would have a whole lot of questions here about how they actually justify any of it, but they're not really trying to do that, are they? They don't have to when they're just hanging out in their echo chamber. They just have to spout the commonly held beliefs, and everybody just nods their head like a bunch of bobbleheads approvingly because that's what they want to believe. Except that's still stupid. It's a matter of mindset. If I sat down at a lecture, and it really doesn't matter what kind of lecture it is, but if I don't think that they've sufficiently defended their specific points, then I'm going to be asking a whole lot of questions, even if it's something that I might be predisposed to accept otherwise. I have an inherently critical mind. I just ask a whole ton of questions. That's just the way that I am. Whereas I don't see the religious doing that very often, especially in matters of religion, their religion. They just sit and believe. They don't actually expect any rational justification. They don't think about it very much. And I see lots of people like that these days, religious and otherwise. Don't ask questions. Don't make waves. Just believe. Now, maybe that's just an age thing because I've never been that way. But I just watched a video on video games and how people are influenced by social media into liking things just because it's popular. And I've never been like that either. I like what I like. I don't like what I don't like. I can justify it either way. All the popularity in the world isn't going to make me play something that I don't like. That's not how it works. Yet a lot of people, especially right now, although I might just be noticing a lot more of late, but they're just social sheep. They follow the crowd around right off the cliff just to be able to say that they're part of the crowd. These people are stupid. And it doesn't matter if you're talking about religion or politics or video games, although there isn't a lot of stakes in the last one, I guess. But these people completely lack the capacity to think for themselves, to ask questions and make decisions based on the truth. Most of these people don't care about the truth at all. These people just want to feel good, and that, I'm sorry to say, is just childish.
Yeah.
So it's not good news for them. I mean, and in fact, hell isn't even tragic for them, I think, on a Calvinist view. I mean, it's just what God intends.
Here's another place where he's just making my point for me. And if you watch a lot of religious videos, you will see that a lot where as long as you're not following their belief system, what they say actually sounds really, really stupid. I mean, Tim and Dave only care about what makes them feel good. They don't care about the actual truth. Because the reality is, if there is a God and God intends something, then that's the way it's going to be. No questions asked. People need to learn to deal with that. And I've said before that if there is an evil God that's going to send everybody to an eternity of torture, no matter what we do, no matter what we believe, then I want to know that. Is that a comforting thought? No, but it is reality, and I care about reality. People like Tim and Dave, they don't. They're showing you that right there on screen. They just don't care about what is actually true. Now, I don't think you'd want to celebrate being tortured forever. You'd be a fool to bow down and worship this monster god. But if it's going to happen, then it's going to happen, and there's nothing you can do about it. Grow up and deal with the reality that you live in. If there's no way to avoid it, then just deal with the coming apocalypse. Stop caring about your fee-fees. This is just dumb.
Right.
The only way to avoid that, it seems to me, is for folks just to sort of speak outside of out of both sides of their mouth at the same time. Like, well, God's genuinely offering them this possibility. But look, if your hands are tied behind your back and I offer you something and I say, look, I'm offering it to you, take it. And you're like, I can't. My hands are tied behind my back. I'm like, hey, whatever. I offered it. It wasn't a genuine offer, it seems to me.
But in the Calvinist view, it isn't an offer. It's just the way that reality is. It's just the way that God is. Now, you're welcome to feel about it however you'd like, as irrelevant as that happens to be. I don't think gravity is offering me anything. Gravity is just the reality that I live with, and I have to deal with it as it is because I don't exactly have any say in the matter. That's why when somebody asks if I want to believe in a God, I say no. I don't want there to be a God. I don't want there not to be a God because what I want doesn't matter. It's either there or it's not. I want to know what is actually true and understand how to rationally and evidentially come to that conclusion. If it's true, it's true. If it's not true, it's not true. My feelings have nothing at all to do with it. The religious don't seem to be able to understand that because to them, their feelings are all that matter. But that's not true. Their feelings don't matter at all. They don't matter at all. And I think that's something that a lot of people have a really hard time coming to grips with. Reality is what it is, no matter how you feel about it. You've got to come to grips with that if you hope to be at all rational in your life. And lots of people don't. And that's why lots of people are dumb.
So yeah, I think that some people who haven't thought about this as much as they should gravitate toward Calvinism simply because they think that this is the position that you need to take once you recognize our radical need for God's grace.
Or because a straight reading of the Bible makes it clear that it's got to be true. If you believe any of it in the first place, which, let's be honest, most Christians don't. 45,000 distinct sects and all that. Pretty much, they're mostly doing what these two are doing, just picking and choosing the parts they like and ignoring the rest. If you accept that God is the way that most people define God, as irrational as that is, then Calvinism is pretty much the only conclusion you can come to. If God is the omniproperty thing that they believe in, then it really has to be true, doesn't it? They just don't like that because, well, in some interpretations, that makes God a moral monster, and they sure can't have that. That's why fee-fees and faith mean absolutely nothing. It's like casting gravity as a god. Some people are just destined to fall off a cliff. Well, how do we know which ones? Well, the ones that we find splattered all over the place at the bottom. But people aren't going to like that, so they're going to recast gravity as something else. But it works no better with gravity than it does for any god. A thing is what it is. If there is a God, then that God is what that God is. How you feel about that God, how you feel about what that God is like, that's irrelevant. Your feelings don't matter. Yet that's all the religious have ever done, right? Just make up God concepts in their heads with the express purpose of making themselves feel better, not of coming to any actual rational conclusions about a real thing that demonstrably exists, because they haven't got any evidence that there is a real thing that actually exists. You can't just redefine real things on a whim because you don't like what they're like. It is what it is. Get over yourself.
And that's a mistake.
Mhm.
Yes, we need God's grace, but that does not mean that you need to embrace a compatibilist and Calvinist view of these matters.
It doesn't mean that your feelings are important. Just stop. You're making a fool of yourself. This is one of the reasons why I like looking behind the curtain every now and then, because it becomes so absurdly obvious what it is that they're doing wrong. This is what they want to be true, not what is actually true. They don't care about the actuality at all. This is all fee-fees, not fact. This is just, but I really want it to be true, without caring if it actually is. This is just two dumb people showing the world how dumb they are. That's not exactly a surprise, is it? Yet they can never get it through their own heads, can they? Why? Because they just don't care. This is two idiots telling each other stories that they made up in their own heads, nothing more. How these morons got any kind of social or political power, I will never know, but it's a good thing that they're just losing it, because this is really stupid. The more that we can point out just how dumb it all is, the better off we'll all be in the long run. And that goes for more than just the religious morons. It goes for everybody else as well. Your feelings don't matter. Get the hell over yourself.
And in fact, it seems to me, it raises serious questions about God's nature, God's love, God's goodness. It raises a serious question of if God is the author of sin. And the moral argument, it seems to me, is really difficult to advance in that sort of context. And I also think it makes the problem of evil intractable.
None of which are real in the first place. These are supposed to be adults, aren't they? But they come off sounding like two Harry Potter fans trying to argue about Harry's nature in the fight against Voldemort. Really, that's all that they're doing. These aren't smart people, and we need to stop playing nice and letting them yammer on like they have a clue what the hell they're doing. Because they don't. They just want to believe it. This is all just make-believe. There is no reason to think any of it is true. Saying, well, this just makes us question God's nature. Great, how do you know anything about the supposed God in the first place? How do you know anything about God's nature, and how do you prove it to others outside of your cult? You can't. And that's why the only response is to ask a lot of questions, and when that inevitably fails, just laugh at their stupidity. Embarrass these people, because that's really the only tool that works. The worse they feel about the stupid things they believe, the better. How do you know this crap, and how do you prove it to anyone else? How come you look like a complete dumbass to anybody who doesn't already believe? Don't stop asking these questions, because it's the fastest way to get them to back down, or for them to have a complete psychotic break, and for a lot of these people, it's probably too late for that. These people are idiots. Watching them spew their idiocy when they think that nobody's watching, that just proves it. All the faith and fifis in the world won't change that. We need to be more intelligent than that as a species. We're not going to get anywhere if we're acting like these two. Let's stop playing these childish games. It's time for humanity as a whole to grow the hell up. Who's with me?